The name is William Carter. In the fall of '45, fresh off the boat from the European theater where I'd served as a regimental scout, I came back to New York and joined the NYPD's homicide squad. The city was still shaking off the war. You had ration books, abandoned kids, and millions of discharged GIs who couldn't find their footing in civilian life. Against that backdrop, the underworld was booming. I got assigned to Captain Gregory Hale's crew. Hale was a short, stocky veteran cop with an ironclad sense of confidence. He kept me at arm's length. To him, I was just a greenhorn who needed to be broken in before he could be trusted. Our main target was the Black Cat Gang, a ruthless, cocky outfit that left a silhouette of a cat at every crime scene. They'd graduated from simple housebreaks to hitting major department stores and warehouses, and they didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. From day one, I was thrown headfirst into one of the most dangerous investigations in post-war New York. It was also a testing ground for Captain Hale's methods that set off alarm bells in my head from the very start. Hale was a pragmatist who didn't care about compromises. To him, the end always justified the means. To me, the law and the badge still meant something. That clash of philosophy was the first crack between us, a crack that would only widen as the case dragged us deeper into the city's darkest corners. The first case cracked open with a grocery store heist over on Brooklyn Avenue. They found the night watchman dead in the back room, and that familiar cat silhouette scrawled on the wall. The signature was unmistakable. Hale was quick to squeeze a petty pickpocket nicknamed Brick, a guy with enough street cred to know how the underworld was shifting. But Brick wasn't talking. Right in front of me, Hale set a trap. He slipped a stolen wallet into Brick's pocket and caught him with the evidence on the spot, forcing him to cooperate under the threat of a hard stretch inside. It turned my stomach, planting evidence, cutting corners, and trampling the law just to get a result. I told Hale straight to his face that it was dirty. He just looked at me, calm and steady, and said a thief belongs behind bars, no matter what piece of paper puts him there. Brick was guilty of a dozen other things anyway. The end justified the means. That conversation was our first real fallout, a rift that would hang over the whole investigation and shape the man I'd become. But my moral objections didn't slow the clock. We beat the names and locations out of Brick, and the threads started pulling us deeper into the underworld. That was the moment I truly felt the gulf between the military standards I'd lived by in Europe and the raw, ugly logic of working the streets. In the war, survival meant cold calculation and discipline. Out here, they threw the rule book out the window. The moral dilemma Hale had dragged me into wasn't some abstract debate anymore. It was threatening to become my everyday reality. On one of our days off, Hale talked me into getting out of the city, to clear the pipes, as he jokingly put it, though we really just needed to escape the pressure. That was where I met Mary Sinclair. She was a bright, gentle soul, and I fell for her the second I saw her. Her warmth and simplicity felt like an oasis after the brutal city streets. Within weeks, I knew I wanted to put a ring on her finger. That slice of heaven was a strange contrast to the darkness of my day job. Through a grifter and pickpocket named Maddie Bonds, a girl walking a tightrope between being a police informant and staying loyal to her own, the first real tracks of the Black Cat Gang began to surface. Word on the street was about a slick, sharp-dressed operator nicknamed Fox. He moved easily through high society but kept his hands dirty in the underworld. I felt my life splitting down the middle into two distinct worlds. There was my home life, built on the hope of a normal, quiet future with Mary. Then there was the squad, where fates were decided and dark secrets buried. They felt completely incompatible, but my gut told me they were on a collision course, and the fallout would change everything. The gang struck again, pulling off a major heist at a food warehouse over in Brooklyn. They left the night watchman dead in the back room, and that damn cat silhouette scrawled on the wall. But this time, we caught a real break. A K-9 unit picked up the scent and tracked it straight to an abandoned garage on the edge of town, where they found a stash with some of the boosted loot. It was our first piece of hard, physical evidence. Hale didn't rush to make an arrest. Instead, he set up a stakeout, betting the boys would come back for the goods or try to contact whoever held the lease on the garage. For our observation post, we commandeered an apartment belonging to a woman named Vera Motorin, a known associate who'd been on the department's radar for a while as a handy fixer for the mob. The setup looked airtight. We staked out the place from across the street, watching the entryways and keeping tabs on every shady character who walked in, But the longer we sat on it, the clearer it got that someone in the underworld had been tipped off. What was supposed to be a trap turned into a grueling waiting game. The city went dead quiet, and every little noise felt like a fuse burning down. And right on cue, the midnight silence shattered. What started as a tight, calculated operation suddenly became a chess match against an invisible shadow, someone who knew our next move before we even made it. That was the night I first realized just how razor-thin the line is between a lucky break and total disaster. Tagging Fox gave us a vector, but it also blew the case wide open into a dozen new directions. We started tying together old statements, forensics, and word from our snitches. Meanwhile, the investigation into Laura Grudz's murder under DA Investigator Daniels kept bleeding into our files. Witnesses, drop spots, and half the names on our sheets were showing up on his, too. Interrogating Grudz's family and inner circle dragged up some ugly dirt. Her home life was a powder keg, unpaid debts, hidden arrangements, and midnight meetings in smoke-filled back-alley joints. It was becoming crystal clear that her murder wasn't just some domestic dispute. She was caught up in a much larger web. Some of the names dropped during those sit-downs led straight back to Fox's stomping grounds: small-time fences, bagmen, and guys dealing in boosted goods. I was getting better at piecing the puzzle together from whatever scraps we could find. What looked like a string of random hits at the start was hardening into a pattern. Despite my constant friction with Hale over his dirty tactics, I had to give the man his due. He had a freakish instinct for the underworld, almost like a sixth sense. For my part, while I tried to keep my nose clean and play by the book, I was slowly developing that same sharp eye for the little details, something I never thought I had in me. My life away from the squad room was the only thing keeping me anchored. Mary and I had already set a date for the wedding, and in the middle of all this chaos, she was my only constant. But the deeper I dug into the mud, the louder that voice in my head got, warning me that my two worlds couldn't stay separated forever. Pretty soon, I'd find out just how tightly twisted the knots were between the people I loved and the ghosts I was hunting for justice. On the eve of the wedding, the whole crew gathered for a quiet dinner back at the precinct, a rare breather before the final push. The next morning, we cracked a dealer named Stream. He was a small-time middleman running the supply lines, and he gave up the spot where Fox was supposed to show that night, a Manhattan joint on a busy intersection where high-end clients went to mix with people who wanted to stay invisible. The setup went by the book. We staked out the tables, tucked our guys away in the dining room and by the entrance, and covered the back doors. I sat there thinking about Mary. In 2 days, we were supposed to be trading vows. All night, the waiting cut both ways. The anticipation of the wedding tangled up with the knots in my stomach over what could pop off at any second. The moment Fox walked in, something about him looked twitchy. Maybe he figured he'd been spotted, or maybe his instincts just kicked in. He made a hard break for the exit, and the chase was on through the neon-lit Manhattan streets. I was bounding over sidewalks, dodging traffic, and tearing down alleys near the intersection. With every passing block, it felt like more than just a foot chase. It was a final exam for everything we'd done, every choice we'd made, and every corner we'd cut. Coats were flying, pedestrians were diving out of the way, and the blur of storefront windows flashed past until we finally slammed Fox into the pavement. It was a long, adrenaline-fueled sprint that left us gasping, knowing we were right on the edge of the truth, but that there were still plenty of dark rooms and locked doors ahead. I came back home a different man than the one who'd left for dinner. The upcoming wedding felt like stepping into another life, and today was just the city's way of reminding me that the past doesn't let go without a fight. Interrogating Fox was like trying to punch a ghost. He was charming, cool as ice, and talked like the whole rap sheet was just one big misunderstanding. Fox claimed he was nothing more than a middleman, a front for the public, not the architect of the operation. Every word, every drawn-out silence was calculated. He knew exactly how to deflect, stall, and play the innocent. But as we stacked his story against our forensics and the corroborating statements from the other callers, the puzzle pieces started telling a different story. Fox was definitely running the front end of the Black Cat gang. He handled the fences and smoothed things over with high society, giving the outfit its ruthless, high-class mystique. But behind that storefront, you could see the hand of someone else, the real player pulling the strings from the shadows. Meanwhile, Laura Grudz's ghost was still haunting us. As DA Investigator Daniels dug deeper into her inner circle, He mapped out a trail between her midnight rendezvous spots and the very same joints Fox used for business. It wasn't a coincidence. The web was wider than we'd ever imagined. Laura's murder was tangled up in extortion, protection money, or bad debts, and the threads ran straight to the people holding the real leverage in the gang. In the end, it was clear that bagging Fox was just a drop in the bucket. To kill the black cat, we had to cut off the head, the ghost with the actual power. Hale and I started blueprinting an undercover play to penetrate the network through the gang's trusted bagmen, and the moment they tapped me to be the guy on the inside, the air in the room turned to lead. It was a gamble that could cost me everything. The assignment was a suicide run that demanded everything I had. I agreed to play the part of a rogue cop, someone the outfit could slide into their inner circle. Through a planted kite and a sit-down with the broad who ran their fences and held the bridge to the gang's high-ups, I convinced them I was looking for a bigger slice of the pie. It took months of careful acting, a few rigged scores, and one airtight display of my reliability before they finally let me in. They brought me into the inner sanctum to face the real boss, a shadow dweller the underworld called Hunch. The guy had a flat face, a wicked deformity between his shoulder blades, and the swagger of a man who owned everything and feared nothing. Sitting in that dimly lit joint, I kept my mask clamped on tight. But what I heard and saw in that room knocked the wind right out of me. Standing among the cutthroats was my old comrade in arms, Sergeant Tony Stone, the very man I'd shared a foxhole with, the man who'd saved my skin in Europe. The war broke men in different ways. For some, coming home was a sanctuary. For others, it was the top of a slippery slope. Tony was one of those guys who couldn't find his footing in civilian life. He'd lost his compass and plunged headfirst into the rackets. Seeing him there, in that den of thieves, showed me just how thin the line is between doing your duty and losing your soul. That same night, the city delivered a knockout blow. Mary, who'd been volunteering at the hospital, got caught in a crossfire on the other side of town. She didn't make it. I found out after the fact, and the news hit me like a physical explosion. Losing Mary shattered my whole universe. Everything I'd been living for, every plan for a quiet, ordinary life, vanished in a heartbeat. My chest tightened, and the world went cold. Balancing on a razor's edge inside the gang, I wasn't just an undercover agent anymore. I was trapped between the ghosts of a battlefield brotherhood and a personal tragedy that screamed for vengeance. The moral dilemma was staring me right in the face. How do you move forward when the price of justice is paid with the lives of the people you loved and the man you used to be? Inside that lair, I knew any wrong move could mean a bullet, either for me or for the one man I wanted to save. My personal life was now tied in a blood knot with the badge, and more than just my own survival hung on the choice. Hale knew we were running out of road. The intel I'd brought back from the inside gave us the blueprint we needed. Hit the lair right when most of the crew was tied up moving the next shipment of boosted goods. The play required surgical precision. We needed teams at the entryways, sharpshooters on the rooftops, assault groups ready to breach, and blocks on every getaway route. My job was to stay inside as the handler, the guy who'd convince Hunch to greenlight the final deal, walking the gang straight into an open-air trap. The night of the raid was thick and humid. You could smell the gasoline and cheap tobacco, hear the static of the radio whispers and the scuffle of boots. At the prearranged signal, muted commands crackled through the dark. It was now or never. I hung back in the crowd, faking a calm facade while my insides were on fire. Hunch sat atop his petty little empire, flanked by hard-faced triggers. Tony stood a bit further off, like a soldier waiting for his next objective. The moment I gave the nod that the deal was live, the sky fell in. Gunfire erupted from the rooftops, doors splinters flying as the teams breached, and a siren wailed inside. Not a real one, just the cold, piercing shriek of raw human panic. Order dissolved into pure chaos. Men who'd felt like kings 5 minutes ago were now scrambling like rats trying to survive. In the half-light, I saw familiar faces blur together. Dirty hands clawed for snub-nosed revolvers. Bodies dropped, and men screamed. Hale and his boys busted into the main hall. I tried to keep playing the part of the dirty cop, but my chest was hammering like a piston. I had to guide the assault groups so they wouldn't miss the high-ups in the confusion. In the panic, one of the shooters made a hard break for the window. The next second, Hale's voice rang out like a death sentence, and the guy crumpled to the floor. Right then, Tony made a move to run. I lunged forward, trying to stop my old comrade without drawing blood, but his hand was already on his piece. Hale pulled the trigger. The slug caught Tony in the shoulder, then another in the gut. He tried to fight it, but his knees buckled and he went down. His eyes weren't filled with shock, just a kind of fading clarity, like a man remembering the front lines and his final home all at once. I knelt over him, holding his hand, watching the light drain from his eyes. There was no triumph in that room, just a total collapse. The bad guys were down, the gang was broken, but inside me, a hollow void was opening up. After the raid, the Black Cat gang was effectively dead. Hunch and most of his high-ups were either behind bars or in the morgue. Fox was locked down, and their distribution network was ripped to shreds. But none of it brought Mary back. They dragged me out of that den along with the ruins of my old life. A blood-soaked circus of law and morality that left nothing but scars. The morning after the play, Hale and I stood in the weak, grey dawn, counting the dead. He looked out over the wreckage in silence, and for the first time since I'd known him, he spoke softly. We did what we could. The words didn't feel like comfort. They felt like a receipt for the price we'd paid. But just when the case felt signed, sealed and delivered, a desk phone in the squad room cut through the quiet with a sharp ring. Hale picked it up, listened for a beat, and slammed his hand down on a stack of files. The look in his eyes wasn't triumph. It was pure, unadulterated shock at whatever was on the other end of the line. He slid a single page of a briefing memo across the desk to me. According to bank wires and deep-dive ledgers, they'd flagged new paper trails showing outside financing for the outfit. Huge sums laundered through offshore accounts, with signatures tracing straight back to the pillars of New York high society. Big business moguls, high-end restaurateurs, and a handful of city officials. It hit me like a bucket of ice water. Smashing the Black Cat gang was just the tip of the iceberg. Hunch and his deformity were nothing but a local storefront. The real matrix of control and leverage ran way deeper, and it was far more lethal. I realized our raid had only clipped the weeds. The roots were tangled up with the country club crowd, the guys who wore silk ties and paid taxes. In the end, the truth stared back at me in a new, bitter light. We'd cut off the snake's tail, but the viper's nest was still warm. I knew one thing for certain. The war against this machine was going to be a long, bloody haul, and the price of admission wouldn't just be paid in spent shells, but in the very vows we'd made to ourselves when we left the battlefields of Europe behind.